Elena Carter sat quietly on the couch, watching the snow drift down through the frosted window. The glow of Christmas lights painted the living room in warm colors. She had hoped this night would bring her peace, maybe even a little comfort. She thought being surrounded by her family would ease the weight she carried inside. But instead of warmth, the room felt colder than the winter outside. Ryan, her older brother, leaned against the wall with a sharp look in his eyes. His wife Megan sat beside him, her arms folded, a smug smile tugging at her lips. Elena tried to ignore them, focusing on the faint sound of Christmas music playing in the background. But Ryan's voice cut through the room like a knife. "Elena, don't you think it's time you moved on?" he said loudly so everyone could hear. "You've been here too long. You're almost 30, and what have you done with your life? Nothing. You just sit here, taking from everyone." Elena's heart sank. She turned to her mother, Linda, hoping for a gentle word. But her mother kept her eyes down, fiddling with her hands. Her father, Charles, sat in his chair, silent, his face unreadable. Elena opened her mouth to defend herself, but before she could, Megan chimed in. "Ryan's right," Megan said, her voice dripping with false concern. "It's not fair to the rest of the family. You're not a child anymore. Maybe if you had some direction, maybe if you had a real job, you wouldn't still be here. Honestly, it's embarrassing." Elena felt her cheeks burn. "I've been trying," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm working small jobs. I'm doing my best. I just needed some time." Ryan laughed harshly, cutting her off. "Your best? Please. Look at me. I built my own life. I take care of my family. I didn't come running back home when things got hard. You've always been weak, Elena. Always." The words stung deeper than he could know. Her chest tightened as tears threatened to spill, but she forced them back. She wanted someone, anyone, to speak up for her, to say she mattered. But Linda stayed quiet. Charles stayed silent. The room grew tense, the air heavy. Ryan's voice rose again. "You're dragging this family down. You've overstayed your welcome. It's pathetic." Elena's hands trembled. She turned to her father, her last hope, her eyes begging him to tell Ryan to stop, to tell her she still belonged here. For a moment, Charles's eyes met hers. Then he sighed, leaning back in his chair. "It's time you leave this house," he said firmly. The words hit her harder than she could have imagined. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. Elena blinked at him, her mouth open but no words coming out. The betrayal was sharp, cutting into her deeper than any insult Ryan had thrown. She stood slowly, her body stiff, her heart breaking. She went to her room, packed her single suitcase, and returned to the living room. No one spoke. Megan smirked. Ryan crossed his arms, satisfied. Linda kept her eyes on the floor, tears pooling but never falling. Charles looked away. Elena stood in the doorway, clutching her suitcase handle tightly. The soft tune of Silent Night floated from the radio, mocking her pain. Snowflakes pressed against the window outside, the world covered in white, but inside she felt only darkness. With her head held high, though her eyes burned with tears, she stepped into the cold night. The door closed behind her with a final click. She was out, not just from the house, but from the fragile hope of family she had clung to. On Christmas night, Elena Carter was cast out. Into the snow. Into the silence. Into the cold. Once a promising law student, Elena Carter thought she had her future mapped out. She was sharp, hardworking, and determined to make something of herself. Professors praised her, classmates admired her, and she carried the quiet hope that she would one day become a lawyer who fought for those who had no voice. For a while, life felt bright and full of promise. But everything changed when she fell in love with the wrong man. At first, he was charming and supportive, someone who seemed to understand her better than anyone else. Slowly, though, his love turned into control. His words became weapons, his affection turned into manipulation. By the time Elena realized she was in an abusive relationship, the damage was already done. Her confidence crumbled piece by piece. She stopped going to classes, stopped studying, stopped believing in herself. Eventually, she dropped out of law school altogether, unable to carry the weight of her pain. Years passed, and Elena found herself working small jobs just to survive. Waitressing, answering phones, filing papers in cramped offices. Each day blurred into the next. She told herself it was only temporary, that one day she would find her footing again. But the longer she stayed stuck, the harder it became to climb out. When her savings ran out and life felt too heavy to bear on her own, Elena moved back into her parents' house. She thought she would find comfort there, a safe place to heal. She believed her family would understand, that they would help her piece herself back together. After all, isn't family supposed to be a shelter when the world turns cruel? But instead of comfort, she found judgment. Her brother Ryan had always been the golden child, confident, successful, admired. He had a stable job, a beautiful wife, and 2 children who looked at him like he could do no wrong. Ryan knew he was the pride of the family, and he wore it like a crown. He used his achievements like a weapon, a reminder of how far Elena had fallen behind. Every time he looked at her, every time he spoke to her, there was a shadow of scorn in his tone. "Look at what I've built," he often said. "And look at you. Still drifting, still depending on others." Megan, his wife, made things worse. She had a way of speaking softly in their parents' ears, planting seeds of doubt about Elena. To Charles, their father, Megan whispered about responsibility, about how Elena was becoming a burden. To Linda, their mother, she sighed about wasted potential, about how disappointing it must feel to watch a daughter throw her life away. Charles never needed much convincing. He had always valued appearances over feelings. To him, Ryan was proof that he had done well as a father, while Elena was a reminder of failure. He favored Ryan openly, praised him at every chance, while his words to Elena were cold, clipped, often laced with disappointment. Linda loved her daughter deeply, but her love was weak. Whenever Charles or Ryan spoke harshly to Elena, Linda lowered her eyes and stayed quiet. She cried in private, prayed in silence, but rarely defended her out loud. She lived in fear of upsetting her husband and disappointing her son, and so she let Elena stand alone. Living in that house felt like carrying 1,000 invisible cuts. Every day was a reminder of what Elena had lost, of how far she had fallen. She wanted to believe she was strong enough to rebuild her life, but their constant words chipped away at her. She tried to ignore Ryan's smug comments, Megan's whispers, Charles's cold looks. She tried to cling to the love she knew still lived in her mother's heart. But in quiet moments, when she lay awake at night staring at the ceiling, she wondered if they were right. Maybe she was a failure. Maybe she had wasted her potential. Maybe she was unworthy of love, unworthy of belonging. The rejection that night on Christmas did not surprise her as much as it confirmed her deepest fear. She had always sensed it. She just hadn't wanted to believe it. Now, standing outside in the snow with her suitcase in hand, Elena felt the truth sink in fully. To them, she was not the promising law student she once was. She was the broken, discarded daughter who had overstayed her welcome. And the silence of her parents cut deeper than Ryan's words ever could. Alone on Christmas night, Elena walked through the freezing streets with her suitcase dragging behind her. Snowflakes clung to her hair and lashes, melting into tiny drops that stung her cheeks. The world around her was silent, except for the crunch of her boots against the icy pavement, and the faint hum of Christmas lights glowing from windows she passed. Families were together, laughing, eating, celebrating. She, on the other hand, had no place to go. Her breath came out in small clouds. She pulled her coat tighter, but it did little to stop the cold. Each step felt heavier than the last. She had thought her parents' house would be a safe place, but now she was more lost than ever. As she stopped at the corner of a dim street, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She almost ignored it, not wanting to talk to anyone, but when she glanced at the screen, her heart tightened. It was Marcus. Marcus had been her close friend back in law school. He had always believed in her, even when she didn't believe in herself. They hadn't spoken in months, maybe longer, but somehow his name lit a spark of memory, back to a time when she was full of hope. She answered with shaky hands. "Hello. Elena." His voice was warm, steady, just the same as she remembered. "Merry Christmas. I wasn't sure if you'd pick up." The words broke her. The tears she had been holding back spilled all at once. She pressed the phone close, her voice trembling. "Marcus, I don't know what to do. They threw me out. My own family. Ryan, Megan, even my dad, they said I don't belong there anymore." Marcus didn't rush her. He let her cry, his silence soft and patient. When she finally caught her breath, he spoke gently. "Elena, listen to me. You're not a failure. You've been through so much, but that doesn't erase who you are. You're still smart. You're still strong. You still have what it takes to finish what you started. She shook her head, though he couldn't see it. No, Marcus. I'm not that girl anymore. I'm nothing now. Just nothing. You are not nothing, Marcus said firmly. You have unfinished potential. I know it, and deep down so do you. You just need to believe it again. His words stirred something inside her. A tiny ember, hidden under layers of pain, began to glow. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand, listening as Marcus continued. There's something you need to know, he said, his tone shifting, more serious now. I didn't want to say anything until I was sure. But Elena, Ryan isn't the man everyone thinks he is. Elena froze. What do you mean? I've been handling some property cases in town. I came across documents connected to your family. Elena, Ryan has been pressuring your father to sign over property deeds. He's been manipulating him, tricking him into moving assets under his name. If it keeps going, you and your mother will be left with nothing. Everything will belong to him. Elena's heart pounded. No, that can't be true. Dad wouldn't. Your father doesn't see it, Marcus interrupted softly. Ryan's clever. He makes it look like simple paperwork, but it's fraud. He's stealing the inheritance right out from under you. The cold no longer bit at her skin. Instead, fire rushed through her veins. For so long, she had felt powerless, beaten down by words, by silence, by her own doubt. But this betrayal, ignited something new. Anger. Not just at Ryan, but at herself for letting him control the story for so long. Her grip tightened on the suitcase handle. She could still hear her brother's voice mocking her, calling her weak, a failure. She remembered Megan's smirk, her father's silence, her mother's downcast eyes. For years she had carried their judgment like chains. But now she saw the truth. Ryan wasn't strong because he was better. He was strong because he lied, cheated, and crushed others to stay on top. And she wasn't going to let him win. Elena, Marcus said carefully, you can fight this. Legally, and in every other way. But you need to decide. Are you ready to take your life back? Elena stood still on the snowy street, her breath quick and heavy. For the first time in years, she felt more than pain. She felt purpose. Her hands stopped trembling. Her shoulders straightened. Yes, she whispered. Then louder, firmer. Yes, I'm ready. Her reflection in a dark shop window showed a tired woman with red eyes and tangled hair. But behind the pain was something stronger, something fierce. She wasn't just the discarded daughter anymore. That night, on the frozen streets of Christmas, Elena Carter made her first real decision in years. She would fight back. Against Ryan. Against the lies. Against the silence that had swallowed her voice. She wasn't broken. Not anymore. Elena reconnected with Marcus in the days that followed. He became the steady voice she needed, reminding her of the strength she had almost forgotten she possessed. At first, it felt strange to talk about law again, to even imagine herself in that world. But Marcus refused to let her sink back into doubt. You were one of the best in class, he told her one evening over coffee in a small diner. You still are, Elena. It doesn't just disappear. You can pick it up again. Her hands trembled around the warm mug. But for the first time in years, she let herself believe him. With his guidance, Elena began studying again. She borrowed thick books Marcus recommended, their spines heavy with knowledge she once knew by heart. The nights were the hardest. She worked long shifts at a small store to keep afloat, coming home with aching feet and tired eyes. But every morning, before the sun rose, she forced herself to sit at her desk with a cup of tea, pages spread open, determination pushing her forward. Some mornings she wanted to quit. Some mornings the old voice in her head whispered that Ryan was right, that she was too weak, too broken. But then she remembered Marcus's faith in her, and the spark of anger toward her brother that refused to die. That anger kept her moving. Meanwhile, Ryan grew bolder. Charles, their father, trusted him blindly. When Ryan brought new papers for Charles to sign, Charles never questioned him. He believed Ryan was protecting the family, managing things like a real man. Elena learned through Marcus that Ryan was now convincing Charles to change his will, removing Elena entirely from the inheritance. The news cut her deeply, but it also hardened her. She tried to speak with her mother one evening, meeting Linda secretly at a small park. The snow was falling gently, and Linda's hands shook as she held her daughter's. "Mom, please," Elena begged, tears burning her eyes. You know what Ryan is doing isn't right. He's stealing. He's taking everything for himself. Dad listens to him, but maybe he'll listen to you. Please say something. Stand up for me. Linda's eyes filled with tears. Her lips trembled, and she looked away. I can't, Elena. You don't understand. Your father. Once he decides something, there's no changing it. If I speak against him, it will only make things worse. So you'll just let him throw me away? Elena whispered, her voice breaking. You'll let Ryan take everything, even my place in this family? Linda wept silently, pressing a kiss to Elena's forehead. I love you, but I can't go against your father. The words shattered Elena more than she expected. She turned away, hugging herself as the snow melted on her cheeks. In that moment she understood. Her mother's love would always be hidden in the shadows, never strong enough to protect her in the light. That night, she broke down completely in her small rented room. She cried into her pillow until her throat ached. For hours, she let herself feel the weight of being truly alone. No one in her family believed in her. No one except Marcus. And then, as if to twist the knife deeper, Megan sent her cruel messages. How's life outside? Cold? Lonely? Maybe now you'll finally learn you were never good enough. Ryan was right about you. Another text followed. Don't worry. We'll take good care of your parents' house. You were just a guest anyway. Elena stared at the glowing screen, her hands shaking with rage. For a moment, she wanted to scream, to smash the phone into pieces. But instead, she closed her eyes, inhaled deeply, and let the pain sink into her bones. She would not let Megan or Ryan destroy her. Not again. The messages became fuel. Every cruel word, every look of disappointment from her father, every silence from her mother. All of it burned inside her, but instead of breaking her, it lit her determination brighter. The days rolled into weeks. Elena's routine became strict. Long shifts at work, stolen hours for study, constant guidance from Marcus. She was fragile, yes, but each step she took added a new layer of strength. Slowly, she began to feel like herself again, the self she had buried years ago. By late December, she was no longer the broken woman who had stood crying on the snowy street. Her eyes carried focus, her voice carried quiet strength. She had documents now. Legal proof Marcus helped her gather, showing Ryan's manipulation and fraud. She kept them safe, hidden in a neat folder on her desk, waiting for the right moment. She also had something more valuable, the letter of eligibility for the bar exam. It wasn't a full victory yet, but it was a symbol, a promise of what she was becoming again. Every morning, she whispered to herself, I am not weak. I am not finished. I will fight. The pain of rejection was still there, but it no longer controlled her. Instead, it sharpened her resolve. She was ready for what was coming. And Ryan had no idea. New Year's Eve arrived, and the Carter house glowed with golden lights and the smell of food. Laughter carried through the rooms as family and friends gathered to celebrate. Ryan stood proudly by the fireplace, drink in hand, with Megan at his side. Charles sat in his favorite chair, while Linda moved quietly between guests, her smile thin and tired. The last person anyone expected to see walk through the door. Elena stepped inside without an invitation, her coat dusted with snow, a neat folder clutched tightly in her hand. The room fell into silence. Glasses froze halfway to lips, conversations cut short. Ryan's sneer was the first sound to break the quiet. Well, well, he said loudly. Look who decided to crawl back. Megan's laugh followed, sharp and cruel. Didn't we make it clear, Elena? You don't belong here anymore. Charles shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his face stiff with shock. Elena, what are you doing here? Elena didn't flinch. She walked straight to the dining table and set the folder down, her movements calm and steady. I came to tell the truth, she said, her voice clear, carrying through the room. Ryan rolled his eyes. The truth? Don't embarrass yourself. You've done enough of that already. Ignoring him, Elena opened the folder and laid out a neat stack of papers. The pages gleamed under the chandelier's light. She pointed to the first. This, she said, is proof of Ryan's fraudulent manipulations. He's been tricking Dad into signing over property, moving assets into his own name. Gasps rippled around the table. Charles leaned forward, his brow furrowing as he scanned the papers. Ryan stepped forward, his face red. This is nonsense. Lies. Don't listen to her, Dad. Elena stayet calm. She slid another document forward. And this, she continued, is a legal petition. It requests that all assets be frozen pending investigation. Ryan can't touch another paper until this is resolved. The color drained from Megan's face, though she quickly forced a smile. Really, Elena? You show up with some copied documents and think anyone will believe you? You're still the same girl who couldn't even finish law school. Elena looked straight at her, unshaken. She pulled out the final paper, her hand steady. And this is a notarized letter from the Bar Association. I am eligible to sit for the bar exam. I am not a failure. Not anymore. For the first time, silence fell heavy on Ryan. His smirk faded, replaced by a twitch of anger. You think a piece of paper changes who you are? He shouted. You're pathetic, Elena. Always have been. But Elena didn't raise her voice. She didn't tremble. She simply reached into her folder one last time and pressed play on a small recorder. Megan's voice filled the room. Keep pushing him, Ryan. Your dad trusts you. Once everything's signed over, Elena won't get a cent. She's too stupid to notice anyway. The recording ended. Megan's smile vanished. Her face went pale, and whispers spread across the room like fire. Charles stared at his son and daughter-in-law, his hands shaking on the armrest of his chair. His voice cracked as he spoke. Ryan, tell me this isn't true. Ryan slammed his fist on the table. It's nothing. She twisted everything. You're going to believe her over me. His voice rose into a scream, spit flying as he turned to Elena. You've ruined everything. But the more he shouted, the calmer Elena became. She stood tall, her voice even, her presence steady. No, Ryan. You ruined everything yourself. I'm just shining a light on it. Charles leaned back heavily, his face pale. His chest rose and fell quickly, and with a groan he collapsed into his chair. Linda rushed to his side, crying out his name. Guests backed away in shock, the room in chaos. Megan grabbed her coat, her voice sharp and panicked. I won't be dragged down with you, Ryan. She stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind her. Ryan stood frozen, his face twisted with rage and fear, his power slipping from his grasp. And in the middle of the storm, Elena remained calm. She gathered the papers back into her folder, her chin lifted. She was no longer the broken sister, no longer the silent daughter. Her quiet strength filled the room, steady against the chaos Ryan had created. The family that had cast her out was now shattered, their illusions broken. But Elena stood unshaken, her voice firm as she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. The truth always wins. In the aftermath, the house felt heavy and quiet. The guests had gone, leaving only the broken pieces of the Carter family behind. Charles sat slumped in his chair, pale and weary. For the first time in Elena's life, he looked smaller, almost fragile. His voice was soft when he finally spoke. I failed you, Elena, he whispered, his eyes lowered. I should have protected you. I should have believed in you. Instead, I pushed you away. I see that now. Elena stood still, her heart torn. Part of her longed to hear those words, but another part knew they had come too late to erase the damage. Still she nodded, her face calm. Linda stepped forward then, her hands trembling as she reached for her daughter. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she pulled Elena into her arms. I'm sorry, she cried. I should have spoken for you. I should have been your voice when you had none. Forgive me, my child. For a moment, Elena allowed herself to sink into her mother's embrace. It was the comfort she had needed for years, though it came after so much silence. She hugged Linda back, her voice gentle. I forgive you, Mom. Meanwhile, Ryan's world began to collapse. Marcus moved quickly, filing legal actions and preparing the case against him. The documents were strong, the evidence clear. Ryan tried to fight, tried to shout that it was all lies, but the law was not on his side. Megan, unwilling to share in his downfall, filed for divorce. Her betrayal cut him deeply, leaving him isolated, angry, and alone. The golden child had lost his shine. Elena, however, began to rise. In the months that followed, she poured her heart into her studies. The long nights of work and study finally bore fruit. She passed her bar exam. The moment she received the letter of success, she sat quietly in her small apartment, tears of relief sliding down her cheeks. For the first time in years, she felt proud of herself. Marcus offered her a place at his firm, and she accepted with gratitude. Walking into that office on her first day as a lawyer felt surreal. The woman who had once been cast out with a suitcase and no hope was now standing tall, papers in hand, ready to fight for justice. Not just for herself, but for others who had been silenced. With each case she worked on, with each step she took in the courtroom, Elena felt stronger. The old wounds were still there, but they no longer controlled her. She was no longer the discarded daughter. She was the woman who had risen from ashes, rebuilt herself piece by piece, and found her power again. And though her family still carried their scars, Elena carried something greater, her own sense of worth, finally unshaken. Months later, Elena drove slowly down the familiar street where her parents' house stood. The snow had melted, and the yard was quiet. Ryan's car was no longer parked in the driveway. The once busy home seemed still, almost empty. She slowed her car as she passed, her eyes tracing the windows where she had once sat and dreamed of being accepted, of being loved without conditions. A part of her wondered if her father was inside, or if her mother still sat by the window at night, but she did not stop. Instead, Elena let out a soft breath and smiled gently to herself. The ache that used to fill her chest when she thought of this house was gone. She no longer needed their approval, no longer longed for their praise. She had found her strength outside these walls, and that was enough. Whispering under her breath, she said, "I came back stronger. That's my justice." The words felt light, like wings lifting her forward. She pressed her foot on the gas and kept driving, leaving the house behind her. Ahead, the city stretched out, alive with possibilities. Later, as she walked toward the office where her new life had begun, her steps were calm and steady. She carried no suitcase this time, no burden of rejection, only confidence, quiet but unshakable. Elena Carter was finally free. Hey loves, thanks for staying till the end. Don't forget to like, drop a comment, and hit that subscribe button for more stories. See you next time.